Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, drone diplomacy at the White House. Highlights from President Trump's meeting with tech executives and their advice to him on what's to come. Plus, a new era at Uber. We bring you details on the final moments leading up to Travis Kalanick's resignation, which investors were responsible for his ouster and why. And as food delivery startup Delivery Hero prepares to go public, we are at the NOAA Internet Conference in Berlin with one of its biggest investors. First, to our lead. President Trump continues to welcome U.S. tech leaders this week to the White House. This all part of the administration's initiative to get the government equipped with the latest technology. Today's meeting was largely centered around emerging technology like drones and IoT, or the Internet of Things. Among the attendees, outgoing GE CEO Jeff Immelt, AT&T CEO Randall Stephenson, and venture capitalist Steve Case. President Trump's main message to this group: remain number one in technology. For more, I want to turn to Tolu Olorunnipa, who covered the meeting for Bloomberg in Washington. So, Tolu, what was the main takeaway from the drone meeting today?
Yeah, the president wanted to talk specifically about how to make sure America is number one in emerging technologies, including the drone industry. There were several CEOs from drone companies, and the president got to see some of these drones in action and talk about. Usually we hear the president talking about the need to get rid of regulations. Some of these drone company CEOs said that the White House and the federal government actually needs to put in appropriate regulations for the drone industry so the industry can expand. The president was hearing some messages from various CEOs about how to keep the U.S. number one in various emerging technologies because several other countries, including China, are pushing ahead with some of these technologies. So that was something the president listened to and said that he was willing to accept some of those recommendations and move forward.
Now, shortly after this meeting with the tech CEOs, Trump posted a tweet confirming that he does not have tapes of his conversations with former FBI Director James Comey. I wonder, is the message from Tech Week getting lost with everything else that's going on?
Yeah, that's a great question, Emily. This is supposed to be Technology Week. The president had this meeting with a number of top CEOs, but right after he left the meeting, he got on Twitter and seemed to step over a lot of his messaging, talking about tapes and sort of this mystery that's been delayed over weeks and weeks after he originally tweeted that James Comey should hope that there are no tapes of the conversations between those two gentlemen. Now the president is saying he did not release any of those tapes, but he even made more questions with his tweet about whether or not there are other types of illegal surveillance going on within the White House and within the West Wing. So the president did seem to step a little bit on his message, but I believe that the White House wants this to be Tech Week and wants people to be focusing on what the president's doing about technology. It seems like his use of technology with Twitter seems to be getting in the way of that a little bit.
Now, I can't let you go without asking about the other big topic in Washington this week. That's, of course, the health care bill. Tell us about the momentum and the chances you see now for this actually passing.
Yeah, this is a bill that's been crafted behind closed doors for the past few weeks. They finally were able to put out a draft version. Now, they're running into some trouble because they only have 52 Republicans, and they have to get at least 50 of them to vote for this bill. There have been several Republicans, both on the conservative side and the moderate side, who are not happy with the bill as it stands. They want to vote on this within the next week, but it does look like they have an uphill climb, with even the president saying that the bill still needs to be negotiated. They still need to make changes before this bill can be ready for his signature. So it'll be interesting to see if Republicans are able to rally around this bill at some point, make some changes and get 50 votes, but it's going to be a very tight margin if they're able to do it within the next week. That's the timeline that they're looking at.
All right, Bloomberg's Tolu Olorunnipa joining us there from Washington. Tolu, thanks so much for that update. For more on this drone meeting with President Trump, we're joined by Kespry CEO George Mathew. He joins us from Washington, where he attended the meeting. Kespry develops drone hardware, software, and cloud services. So, George, you heard the update there from Tolu. Give us some color from inside the room and how it all went down.
Good afternoon, Emily. It was an a great meeting to spend time with this administration. The focus of the administration, and at least this specific area of American leadership in emerging technology, was really to drive into three key aspects of emerging technology. One was, of course, drones, the second was 5G, and the third was IoT. In the context of the drone discussion, really it was around three seminal areas. One is where the regulatory policy currently stands today and how to continue to drive efficiency in terms of the regulation. The second area is around the technology innovation that occur in the drone space, and then, of course, the safety and the security surrounding drones. And so we had an ability to spend time with the president and the administration discussing these key areas and dive into the details in terms of how this can continue to evolve the commercialization of the drone market.
George, we're looking at video of you showing a drone to the president. What was President Trump's mood in general and his level of interest and knowledge of drones specifically?
He was very focused on the topic. He was very much aware of the conversation that was emerging in the drone space. And we had an opportunity for the first time to bring a drone into the White House and walk through the Kespry use cases. For Kespry, we've been focused on industrial use cases where construction, engineering, insurance, mining, and aggregates companies can take advantage of analytics that's generated from the drone that we've built. And so manufacturing this drone in the United States and being able to provide a full cloud infrastructure that supports our users and being able to introduce one of our construction users to the president was quite a seminal moment for Kespry and, of course, the drone industry.
Did Trump give any indication of his plans for supporting the technology going forward, whether it's for consumers and general use or the military?
We really spoke on the commercial aspect, and at least for Kespry's case, the industrial use cases that are involved. And so the entire focus was, at least for this working session, on the commercial use of drones. And so it was interrelated in the fact that IoT, and particularly the expansion of 5G broadband, is, of course, kind of defining where the future of these technologies are going to go. In my view, the drone is the new sensor network, and in that regard, the interrelationship of these topics was quite seminal for us to have this discussion with this administration at this time.
There continue to be safety concerns around drones. What was your message on that to President Trump?
Yeah, our message around this was that the industry itself is very focused on safety and self-regulation. If you think about Kespry today, we have hundreds of drones that are autonomously flying throughout the country and the world. We have over 25,000 flights that we have safely and securely done. So we've actually been one of those key players in terms of being able to autonomously drive the safety and security of these commercial use cases that we've been focused on. So at least in Kespry's case, we haven't had a concern around the need to really pull the right safety levers in place as regulation continues to evolve, because we are considered one of the good actors. And of course, there are bad actors in the middle of all this, and that's where the focus and attention, particularly from a security standpoint for drones, should continue to evolve.
So what are next steps, especially when it comes to the FAA?
Well, it was actually one of the big pieces of the regulatory framework that we talked through. As of Part 107 becoming the law of the land as of October 2016, we have an actual framework to be able to operate in. The framework is that the drone has to fly below 400 feet of airspace, it has to remain within line of sight, and you have to have the Part 107 exam passed. In that context, if you are flying outside of Class G airspace, you actually have to get a waiver. And that's perfectly normal. The challenge is that a waiver today is a manual process that takes over 90 days for anyone to get a waiver to commercially fly in U.S. airspace. And that, I think, is a huge challenge. So it's not even the question of whether the regulation is right. It's a question of how to automate what's already in place as the framework for regulation.
Quickly, George, even before the meeting started, Steve Case, the venture capitalist, posted about, tried to sort of deflect criticism that he was attending this event at all. Why did you think it was important to go visit President Trump?
Yeah, on a personal basis, I thought about that quite a bit, and considering my friends that are close to me in Silicon Valley in specific, the politics surrounding this current administration are what they are. But this is about policy. This is about really understanding how to progress forward in terms of the commercialization of the drone space. And in that regard, we had an opportunity to represent not only Kespry, but the entire sector in this discussion. And we were delighted to see this administration, and ideally future administrations, continue to push forward in terms of driving this innovation around American technology.
All right, Kespry CEO George Mathew in Washington, just out of a meeting with President Trump. Thanks so much, George, for joining us. Now, the world's largest manufacturer of iPhones is preparing to invest $10 billion in the U.S. Foxconn will begin next month with a decision on where to build a $7 billion display-making plant. Chairman Terry Gou has named 7 states where the factory could be built, most of them in the Midwest. He says the company could end up creating tens of thousands of American jobs. Coming up, we go behind the scenes at Uber after Travis Kalanick steps down, breaking down shifting power in the boardroom, plus a campaign by employees to bring the controversial CEO back. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Napster co-founder Sean Parker has stepped down from Spotify's board of directors ahead of a planned U.S. listing. Parker was an early Spotify investor, first joining the music streaming service in 2010. However, plenty of heavyweights will remain at the company, including former Disney COO Tom Staggs and NextEV's Padma Warrior. The world's largest music streaming service is preparing to go public with a listing on the New York Stock Exchange this year. New developments in the wake of Travis Kalanick's exit as Uber's CEO. As the ride-hailing startup tries to begin its new chapter, Bloomberg has uncovered new details behind his abrupt exit and potentially more shakeups to come. Eric Newcomer covers Uber for Bloomberg Tech, joins us now. We've been getting more and more details about how exactly this happened. 2 investors flying to Chicago to deliver him a letter, how it was precipitated.
Right.
Tell us what we know now.
Yeah, so, now it goes from just Bill Gurley at Benchmark in the mix to also Matt Kohler and Peter Fenton. So Gurley, who was on the board until very recently, lets his 2 partners, Peter and Matt, fly to Chicago, meet Travis at the Ritz, and hand deliver him this letter that says, we and other investors want you to resign.
And Gurley was responsible for getting all of these other investors on board, correct?
Right. Fidelity, First Round, Menlo, lowercase. Yeah, they all came together, and that letter is ultimately what got Travis out.
What was it that convinced them that this was the right decision after all these years?
I think there's so much. I mean, I know this Indian rape case really troubled a lot of people. The handling of Waymo came up in it. Both of them have sort of legal issues at play, too. Uber just hired a law firm to sort of defend itself in this civil case and investigate what happened in the Indian rape. The handling of the woman's medical records. So I think that was a very troubling allegation, but so many of them for so long, I think, might have pushed it over the edge.
Another big issue, according to my sources, was that Travis Kalanick, sort of scuttled any potential plans to bring in new talent. He would intimidate, COO candidates in interviews, and they would walk away saying, I can't.
Right. It seemed like he really wanted to be the central hub of the company. I mean, their head of finance, Gautam Gupta, was, very effective, but wasn't very senior. And Travis really resisted bringing in a sort of serious CFO. And I think similarly, there were concerns, like you were saying, about the COO that he was supposed to hire and whether he was going to bring sort of top caliber talent who could draw some of the attention away from him.
So the investors, it seems, really want to clear the way for new leadership, a new CEO who can start fresh. There is a board meeting that's been happening today. Do we know anything?
It should have just ended or ending. So yeah, we're still waiting to see. I mean, I expect David Trujillo, who replaced David Bonderman from TPG, should be there, and presumably Matt Kohler, who replaced Bill Gurley. So the board is changing, even though the firms are staying the same, the names are changing, and then it'll be interesting to see if Wan Ling Martello, who joined it, Nestle called in, and so, this 8-person board still needs more people.
Right, there's a couple of independent board seats still open, right?
Right. Well, the board has approved that they want an independent chair, and so they could one of the independents they already have, or presumably a new independent needs to join. I think Garrett Camp, who's on the board, wrote a letter saying they need board members. So I think they're going to fill this out some.
Garrett Camp, of course, co-founder of Uber and currently chairman of the board. There is a petition being signed by employees requesting that Travis be reinstated.
Yeah, last I checked, it was at like 1,400, so that's about 10% of employees. Very upset that Travis is gone, recognizing his flaws, but I think they really bought into the message of Travis could take a step away, reform, and then come back. I mean, he's so core to the identity.
Is there any chance that he'd actually be reinstated?
I think very unlikely. I think the hope maybe is that he's on the board right now, and I think the question is whether could he have some sort of other role. It's not clear, but I don't think he would. Becoming CEO is very unlikely.
And just quickly, there's now new allegations that Travis Kalanick actually knew that Anthony Lewandowski stole files from Alphabet a year ago.
Right.
What do we know about this?
Yeah, we're still learning. I think that came from Waymo, but a lot of questions are going to be asked about what Travis knew when, and I think that's going to be sort of a continuous theme here as we go forward, figuring out why he sort of would buy this company where it seems like, in retrospect, there were so many red flags.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I know you're going to get right on the phone after this to continue to get new information. Eric Newcomer, who covers Uber for us, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, we bring you an exclusive interview with Rocket Internet's Oliver Samwer, what he has to say about Delivery Hero's IPO and the European tech scene. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Large European companies meet startup founders at the annual NOAA Internet Conference this week in Berlin. The event comes as excitement builds around food startup Delivery Hero and its trading debut next week. Caroline Hyde spent the day at NOAA and caught up with one of Europe's most famous tech investors, Rocket Internet's Oliver Samwer. And Caroline, Rocket owns, what, a 35% stake in Delivery Hero? So Samwer must be eagerly awaiting Germany's biggest IPO of the year.
So right, Emily, and this is crucial for Rocket Internet because, well, it's not since 2014 that we actually saw a success story from its portfolio companies exiting. That was Zalando, and it was back in 2014, as I say, this very same year that Rocket Internet itself, the investor, went public too. And since that date, well, we've seen shares down some 50%. So they've got a lot of proving to do to the market. Therefore, if you're expecting an IPO in excess of $1 billion and you own 35% of it, this is going to be a nice chunk of change going back to Rocket Internet and going back, of course, to their own investor base. And I spoke to Oliver Samwer after being on stage with him, and this is what he had to say.
I think, first of all, it's great for Europe because I think it is a great example of European entrepreneurship. I think congratulations to a team that basically have done a fantastic job. There are over 5,000 people, different nationalities. And I hope it will inspire many other European entrepreneurs to hopefully take their company public too and build bigger businesses, create more jobs, and help show other people that big companies can be created here too.
How close to the operation, to the run-up to the IPO have you been? How much advice have you given? Because you are, in fact, an investor that also knows what it's like to go public.
So we bet first on entrepreneurs. So I think we want them to take the decisions. At the same time, we're always there for advice. And I think on the IPO, Nicholas and myself, we talked a lot. But in the end, he takes decisions, and that's what I want. Yeah. So we basically provide lessons, what has gone historically right, wrong, how basically to handle investment banks, how to handle lawyers, and there are 100 small details. But I think if this company goes public, I think it's their success, and I want it to be their success.
And what about the other portfolio companies that you do have? I mean, I'm a user of HelloFresh. I think of them a lot from your portfolio. But there is an aim now for you to ensure that they potentially become profitable. Is that the way that people want to see with startups now? Is the dialogue change? We don't want just to be revenue growing. We want to see them to be bottom line growing as well.
So I think still the number one priority for all the companies from the very beginning is to reach scale, the critical scale that it needs to break even, to have the operational leverage. Companies like HelloFresh that have been operating for many years, I think, are very close to the scale and the management will decide what scale they ultimately want and when they want to engage strongly on the path to profitability. I think they're making tremendous progress. When, what exactly will again be their choice, and I think I encourage our companies to think very long term and to make the right choices for the long term, as many of the successful models have done in America or China.
And last question for you. Where to put money to work now for you? Where's exciting you? Is it fintech? Is it AI? Can you break it down by sector?
So different to the many years before. Yeah, we started in consumer, we moved in software, now we say all sectors. Because I think anywhere we can find really good entrepreneurs, and so we also do artificial intelligence, we continue to do fintech, we also do e-commerce and travel, we do B2B, we look at autonomous driving, we look at mobility, and I think we try to find amazing entrepreneurs in all sectors and to back them. Yeah, emerging entrepreneurs and emerging technologies, that's what we're looking for.
Not many sectors he's not in, it would seem. That was my exclusive interview with Rocket Internet CEO Ollie Samwer there. And later this hour, we'll bring you more highlights from the NOAA conference that's here in Berlin, with interviews with blockchain CEO Peter Smith and Axel Springer CEO Matthias Doepfner. Emily.
All right, Caroline Hyde in Berlin. Thanks so much, Caroline. We'll get back to you. In other news, JD.com paid nearly $400 million for a stake in London-based online fashion retailer Farfetch. The deal forges an alliance between China's second-largest e-commerce player and the online fashion shop, trying to boost its presence in one of the world's fastest-growing markets for upscale goods. Coming up, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg outlines a new mission statement. We will discuss how the social networking giant wants to be seen on the global stage. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. Nearly all 3 million EU citizens in the UK can stay after Brexit. That promise from Theresa May, who wants to offer them certainty about their futures. The UK Prime Minister spoke at a dinner for EU leaders in Brussels, saying she isn't looking to break up any families. She's seeking a similar deal for Brits in the bloc. Meantime, Germany's Angela Merkel says May's proposal is a good start, but work remains to be done on Brexit. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, wants the international community to take action in Venezuela. That's after 3 months of deadly protests and political unrest. Venezuela's UN mission rejected Haley's call. It sent a statement signed by 57 countries opposing interference. In France, President Macron's new government presented a security bill to beef up police powers against extremist threats to Europe. Macron's government wants to extend France's existing state of emergency through November 1st. South Africa's Jacob Zuma sparred with opposition lawmakers in a parliamentary debate over the country's recession and his job performance. Zuma has faced calls for his resignation from his ruling ANC party. Hundreds of mourners gathered at a high school in Ohio today to celebrate and remember the life of Otto Warmbier, the college student who was detained in North Korea for over a year and died shortly after being returned home in a coma. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti, and this is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. Thursday here in Washington, already 7:30 Friday morning in Sydney. We are joined by Bloomberg's Paul Allen. Paul has a look at the markets for us. Good morning.
Good morning, Elisa. Yes, well, we're looking at some fairly modest gains on ASX futures at the moment to cap off what's been a pretty wild week here on the ASX. Keep an eye on the big banking stocks, however. This is after the state of South Australia announced in its budget that it would be hitting the banks with a levy on liabilities, intending to raise up to $370 million over 4 years, and that's on top of the one announced by the federal government back in May. The Bankers Association have slammed the policy as, quote, a joke. Over in Japan, Nikkei futures pointing to very slight gains, watching Takata again today after steep declines on Thursday for the troubled airbag maker. We're expecting Takata to file for bankruptcy either today or more likely Monday. Other things to watch out for: Nikkei Japan PMI manufacturing for June. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has written a new mission statement to, quote, give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. At an event in Chicago earlier, Zuckerberg rolled out new tools for the site's group services in order to further engage its users.
We have to build a world where every single person has a sense of purpose and community. Or that's how we're going to bring the world closer together. Or we need to build a world where we care just as much about anyone, right? A person in India or in China or in Mexico or Nigeria as we care about a person right here in Chicago.
We're joined now by David Kirkpatrick, CEO of Techonomy and author of The Facebook Effect. David, what's your initial reaction to this change in mission statement, which is slightly nuanced?
Well, there's really been a lot happening at Facebook lately in talking about themselves differently, and I think they are unbelievably responsive to the growing concerns that have been developing about the social impact of their business, starting with fake news, but also facilitating terrorism and a lot of other problems that people are accusing them of contributing to in society, and many of those accusations have some validity. But they're working very hard to say, yes, we're open to talking about that. Meanwhile, today, they're really trying to underscore the truly positive impacts that Facebook has in people's lives. And by talking so much about these communities and specifically emphasizing that Facebook's new mission is going to be to bring more community to the world, I think they're trying to remind people that, you know, for all the problems, Facebook has a lot of truly positive impact in the world.
So how do you imagine our Facebook experience and using the product actually changing as a result of this?
Wow, that's a good question, and I don't know. Probably not that much in any kind of really dramatic way. Certainly, he's clearly emphasizing more this idea of groups. I think all of us will be encouraged to be part of private and public groups more than we are now. They say 100 million people are in the groups today. That's a relatively small percentage of groups that are really, truly socially significant groups. That's a pretty small percentage of their almost 2 billion users. So I would suspect they'll encourage us to try to aggregate more in true conversation. When he says something, he means it. He doesn't mess around. That's one thing.
Now, Mark Zuckerberg was one of the first founders, along with Larry and Sergey at Google, to perpetuate this idea of the cult of the founder, the dual class shares, consolidate power. Now we see Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber, resigning, who had a similar amount of power. What do you make of Travis Kalanick stepping down?
Well, I think Travis Kalanick needed to step down. I mean, clearly, Uber has committed tremendous errors and really, I think, offended the world in so many ways that they had to come up with some sort of reset. But it's sort of ironic to me, you know, thinking that somebody like Travis Kalanick, who's clearly an opportunist and very aggressive and a visionary of a sort, but, you know, not a very ethical or morally minded person, should take his cues from Zuckerberg, who, whatever you say about him, he is unbelievably ethically and morally centered. And, you know, he's a unique character. It's very dangerous to think that if you're starting a company, you should model the way you do it after the freedoms and powers that Zuckerberg got, because he really had the capacity to live up to those powers. And, you know, he is a very responsible steward of Facebook. The kinds of things that you've heard repeatedly over and over again happening at Uber, you never hear about that kind of stuff happening at Facebook. The worst you hear about Facebook is they don't have enough women executives and employees, and that's real. And I know that's something you care about, Emily. And if you should, I care about it. But it's nothing like repeatedly breaking the law, heedlessly making threats, you know, stealing intellectual property, all kinds of horrible things that Uber did.
Sources tell me that Travis had a particularly hard time bringing in other high-level executives into the company. The Sheryl Sandberg of Uber, for example, you know,
Right.
We see the successful partnership between Mark Zuckerberg and Sandberg now, but people forget that there were previous C-suite executives at Facebook that didn't work out. How did Zuckerberg handle that sort of transition in the power dynamics? You were there in the early days, seeing it on the front lines.
Yes, I knew Owen Van Natta, who's actually a pretty talented guy, but nothing like Sheryl Sandberg, I think we'd have to admit. One thing I would just respond to that by saying is, Facebook has almost the lowest executive turnover of any company I've ever seen. People love working with Zuckerberg. He has a very constructive way of working with his senior leadership team. I mean, it's funny hearing people talk about Sheryl Sandberg being a potentially strong candidate to go to Uber and take over Kalanick's job. There's no way that's going to happen. Sheryl Sandberg does not want another job. She is the top candidate that any CEO searcher would want for any job, including GE or probably, senator or governor, maybe even president of the United States. For the time being, she loves her job. She loves working with Zuckerberg, and he is very good at sort of learning from his co-executives and not thinking of himself as superior. He's revered at the company, but he works very constructively with his leadership team. I don't think that's the way Kalanick did it at all.
So let's get back to Kalanick. There's this concern about... Let's get, there's this broader concern about the overall arrogance of founders in Silicon Valley. What lessons do you think founders and investors are going to take from what's happened at Uber?
Well, there is a lot of talk about the greed of investors in sort of enabling Kalanick. And I think that's a very legitimate point. He seemed to be sort of turning an entire industry upside down in a way that could be enormously profitable. People thought he would potentially create a new monopoly a la Facebook or Google. I never thought that was really a strong possibility, but he got people excited by the potential scale of his victory, and they just threw money at him, and I think they did it heedlessly. So certainly we need to see investors being more careful and more sort of nuanced or cautious about how they throw money at people. I mean, I think he was just, let to go run wild because of the greed of his investors. And that's, to me, the simple biggest problem.
All right, David Kirkpatrick, not mincing words, CEO of Techonomy. David, as always, great to have you. Never, of course. That's why we love you. All right. Altice USA climbed in its trading debut after raising $1.9 billion in the second biggest U.S. IPO of the year. The fourth largest U.S. cable company gained 9% after it initially sold nearly 64 million shares for $30 apiece. The IPO comes exactly 1 year after it was formed when its parent company closed the acquisition of Cablevision. Altice USA plans to use the new money for acquisitions, and its CEO says they will look at any type of deal.
Altice USA is focused on cable. We like cable. I think we'd really like the opportunity to have more cable if that was possible. If that's not possible, we'll look at other things.
Coming up, we will have more from the NOAA Internet Conference in Berlin and discuss whether cryptocurrencies are fated to boom or bust. Blockchain CEO Peter Smith is next. This is Bloomberg. Tesla is known for branching beyond cars to batteries, solar panels, and energy storage. Now Tesla is said to be in talks with record labels about creating its own music streaming service. It is unclear if the automaker will ultimately decide to go forward with the service or continue with its current music partners, said the person who asked not to be identified, discussing private information. But it could include multiple tiers of service, starting with a Pandora-like web radio offering. I want to get back to the NOAA conference in Berlin now. One big name in attendance, Blockchain. The Bitcoin currency service provider has announced it's raised $40 million in fresh funding. The influx of cash represents one of the largest investment rounds in the financial tech sector since Britain's vote to leave the European Union. Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde caught up with Blockchain CEO Peter Smith earlier and started by asking about how the company was able to draw in their latest funding round during such a tough political climate.
I think there's two things. The first is that, we've had a pretty incredible year on a growth perspective. And so investors are always sort of willing to back companies that are growing really well and have a strong management team. I think the other thing is that we're pretty diversified. So our market is in Europe. We have a huge, European user base, but it's also majority outside Europe. And so because of that, I think investors are a little more comfortable backing companies.
You talk about growth. Can you give us an idea of what sort of growth that you're seeing? And we've talked about the drivers before, but a lot of it is geopolitical risk from your point of view.
Yeah. So I think there are a few things drives growth. One is, consistently improving your product and making it more useful to people. The other one is certainly the sort of extreme geopolitical risks that we've seen. And when you see that, people want to sort of diversify. They want to find new assets that are maybe not pegged back to the current system. And when that happens, Bitcoin does really well.
Bitcoin, Ethereum, there are plenty of other digital currencies on your books, so to speak, that I can put in the wallet that I build upon blockchain. What are you seeing in terms of the dynamics there? I mean, just yesterday we saw sudden volatility in Ethereum. We're seeing potentially a victim of its own success with this amount of initial coin offerings we're seeing. Is it stressing?
Yeah, so the Ethereum ecosystem in particular has seen a huge run-up. And I think it's probably overheated. I think it's probably a bubble and it'll pop soon. That said, I'm really positive about the long-term outlook on Ethereum. I think markets get irrational for short periods of time. At the same time, I think Bitcoin's doing really well in kind of a stable way. So Bitcoin's come up from maybe 1,000 to 2,500, 2,700, a much more sustainable fashion. And Bitcoin now trades basically as a safe haven asset. So it trades very correlated to gold and other safe haven assets. And so I think generally right now, Bitcoin has seen kind of a slow and persistent run up, and Ethereum is probably in a bubble at the moment.
Blockchain CEO Peter Smith there. Caroline also caught up with Axel Springer CEO Mathias Doepfner. Now Axel Springer is one of the largest digital publishing houses in Europe. She asked about the company's relationship with social media platforms and how he sees it evolving.
Well, social media are a very important reach driver for us. We get access to new readership, and the important thing is that we have in the long run a real sustainable monetization model. Mid-rolls and advertising is one, but paid elements, subscription, has to be a second one. And Facebook is very constructive. They are preparing initiatives in that context. So I'm pretty confident that in a relatively short period of time on social media, we are going to have two revenue streams. We have the data of our clients, and with that, I think a real good business model. And then Facebook is a distribution platform. If Facebook itself would transform into a publisher, or would be forced by politicians to transform into a publisher, then we would have an issue. But I don't think that it's going into that direction. I really think social media are tech platforms for distribution, to connect people, and we publishers are generating the content, strong brands, monetized through advertising and the paying reader.
The question of fake news then, how has it been tackled? Is it more the role of the media and such as yourselves to ensure that people can see the right from the wrong?
Well, to be honest, fake news is first of all nothing new, but the current debate about fake news and the amplification of fake news through social media was actually a very healthy debate, because it showed that it is a big difference between a post where you don't even know who wrote it and a trusted brand that is basically having a track record for decades to really investigate and break news. And so I think it is on the one hand educating people, on the other hand it is also showing the big distribution platforms that they have to attract good content, high quality content. And in a way it has also increased the credibility of branded content, of journalism. And take just some examples like the New York Times with their 3 million subscribers, the highest subscription number in their history, most of it is digital. That is also very much driven by phenomena like fake news and of course the Trump campaign, where people say we need trustful sources, and we are benefiting from that effect with all our brands in our entire portfolio.
How will it affect the German election, do you think?
Well, I think fake news and bots and all these ways to manipulate election campaigns will be also used in the German election campaign. Again, trusted brands have a tremendous opportunity to show what they can do, and in the end people are smart and I think they can distinguish, so I'm not too pessimistic about it.
Axel Springer CEO Mathias Doepfner there. Coming up, Jeff Bezos takes a unique approach to seeking philanthropic ideas. You tell the Amazon founder how to work on philanthropy. And a reminder of our new interactive TV function. You can find it at TV Go on the Bloomberg. You can watch us live. If you miss an interview, you can go back to us or send our producers a message. Play along with the charts. We bring you on air. This is for Bloomberg subscribers only. Just check it out at TV Go. This is Bloomberg. Oracle saw its stock jump in U.S. trading on Thursday after reporting strong fiscal fourth quarter sales. The company extending its record high, having its best day since 2014. Thanks to that stock surge, Larry Ellison saw his fortune jump $3.4 billion. That made the Silicon Valley billionaire by far the biggest gainer on the Bloomberg Billionaires Index today. A tweet from about a week ago from Amazon's Jeff Bezos might have got lost in the shuffle due to the Amazon Whole Foods deal. But it is certainly getting attention now. The tycoon's request to his Twitter network asking how he can best use his wealth to help people has set off a frenzy of responses from every corner of the world. Part of what he wrote says, "I want much of my philanthropic activity to be helping people in the here and now, short term, at the intersection of urgent need and lasting impact." Joining me now from New York to discuss the responses that Bezos received, Bloomberg's Tom Metcalf. So Tom, give us the range. We've got some of the tweets were lighthearted, as in donate $42 to every shareholder of an overpriced grocer. Others said this is refreshing. What about food banks or safe water or mental health care? What did you see?
Yeah, so you're picking through 42,000 tweets, so you've really got the whole range. As you say, there was that rather snarky Whole Foods comment, and it kind of split between the two. You got, as I say, some people just taking the opportunity to sort of complain about Amazon's customer service or asking that Bezos should give Alexa manners, but the majority were pretty heartfelt. So, you know, Bezos' tweet was asking for responses for urgent needs. So it was stuff like, exactly, sort of food, soup kitchens, and also kind of loan forgiveness for students. Teachers was a very popular topic. Basically something which, you know, his money can perhaps impact now and will have long-term impact at the same time.
Taking a look at the Bloomberg, just go to Rich Go, and you see Jeff Bezos hanging out in the #2 spot. Compare what he's trying to do here with what other billionaires have done, whether it's Zuckerberg and the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative or Bill Gates.
Well, I think the first thing to note is there's a lot less information about what Bezos is planning to do. So, yeah, he's second richest in the world, just after Gates. But in comparison to Bill Gates, who's already donated something like 40 billion of Microsoft stock, Bezos has done pretty little in terms of absolute amounts. So he's given around 100 million through his family and also his family's foundation, the Bezos Family Foundation. And also, again, in contrast to someone like Zuckerberg, Zuckerberg's gone out there and said, hey, I'm going to pledge 99% of my Facebook shares. That's about 63 billion today. In contrast, Bezos has sent this one tweet which suggests he's starting to think that way, but he's certainly kind of lagging, I guess, the peers that a lot of people will put him alongside, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg.
Give us some more detail on what his philanthropy has been like so far.
So it's totaled about 100 million, and it's kind of been focused on sort of very specific items, which makes this sort of wide-ranging call for ideas quite surprising. So in Seattle, he's given 10-20 million to a cancer research unit there, and his family foundation's really heavily focused and well known for its sort of attention towards childhood education. So, and that's actually run by his parents, Mike and Jackie. So he's kind of indirectly involved through sort of funding part of that movement.
Any ventures to guess on what it might look like after this tweet?
Well, one thing I have heard is that he's likely probably to do something around job retraining, just because obviously Amazon's had a tremendous impact on the American job market. And one guy was saying, if you look at this cynically, philanthropy can in some ways be used to buy goodwill. So perhaps he's going to, in terms of, he's had that one impact through Amazon's success, and he'll perhaps try to rectify that or offer retraining to some of the American workers who might have been hurt by Amazon's rise.
All right, Tom Metcalf, our Bloomberg Billionaires reporter. Tom, thanks so much. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. All episodes are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That is all for now. This is Bloomberg.